Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Toilets to Titles. My name is Justin Stevens. I'm back with you for another off-season breakdown bonus episode. This one's a special bonus episode. We've got a couple of awesome guests on the show for you tonight, and one of them is kind of cream of the crop when it comes to his fandom for the Denver Broncos, Patrick Chiotti, and then we have Troy Renck from talking about cream of the crop, a cream of the crop sportscaster for your Denver Broncos. We're going to get to that in just a moment. Real quick, we're going to drop this intro and drop all the housekeeping stuff. All right, so let's introduce our guests. So first, we've got Troy Renck from ABC's Channel 7, Sportscaster of the Year a few years ago. Troy, I know that you have a very busy schedule right now, but I also know that you really love to talk Broncos, so I'm super excited to have you on today. How's everything going for you, sir?
Everything's fantastic. It's busy time in a different way. My son plays for Westmont College. They're going to the NAI World Series for baseball, so I've been traveling a lot and then covering some Nuggets, but it's been a different offseason. We've had limited access to players. Sean Payton has changed everything. It's more of a Mike Shanahan vibe, but even Mike Shanahan gave us more access to players. So they're basically like Rocky, training in the wilderness for the big fight. Don't talk about it, be about it. And frankly, based on the results the past 7 years, specifically last 6, hard to blame them for taking a completely different approach because what they were doing was not working.
Right on. Outstanding. That's some intel that I had not heard yet, and this is why we bring on the experts of their team. So Patrick Chiotti, I appreciate you coming on as well. I know you're a big fan, but also since I always forget to tell them how to get a hold of you at the end of the show, I want you to say it now. So where can they catch your stuff, Patrick?
Yeah, you can catch my stuff at on Twitter at Patrick Chiotti. The handle's right there. At BPA Show. Which is our weekly off-season draft show over on the MHRT network. And all of our stuff will also be on Twitter and YouTube as well. And Troy, it's great to see you. You're looking fantastic. Congratulations on your son going to the NAI World Series. That's huge. Very exciting stuff. And as Troy said, Sean Payton's bringing that different vibe to Denver. And honestly, it is very, very muchly needed. So really excited to see what the results of this offseason shutdown is.
Outstanding. So I think right out the gate, we're going to jump into the draft because that was a pretty big draft for the Broncos. I feel like considering the fact that you guys didn't have a first round pick, the one that really stands out to me more than any of them is Drew Sanders. So Drew Sanders was a guy that I personally had locked in as a late first round pick. You guys got him early in the third. I think that's great value. Troy, is there anything else from the draft that really stands out to you that you think is going to be an immediate impact to help this team?
Well, I mean, Sanders, he definitely in rookie minicamp last week, he stood out in a way like Nikola Jokic would stand out standing next to me. I mean, he was different. He was faster, stronger. He's just better than anyone else on the field. It was just like, wow. And I watched him at Arkansas, and I wondered how they're going to use him because he's more of an outside guy at Arkansas. But you can see how they could play him inside and then use him to pressure the quarterback in different ways and be creative with him. I'll be surprised if he's not on the field, not necessarily starting an inside linebacker, but just as like a kind of an X player they could move around. He stood out. Marvin Mims is going to be their punt returner from day one. There's no question they drafted him to do that. I don't know about receiving. We'll have to see that. Clearly, Sean Payton was not comfortable with the receivers room this offseason. They took calls on Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, and they nearly signed Adam Thielen, nearly signed Alan Lazard. So they're not comfortable with the receiving room. So maybe Mims finds a way in. He puts KJ Hamler's future in jeopardy, unfortunately, because KJ just has not been healthy. But another rookie, Riley Moss, you don't trade away a fourth rounder next year to move up into the third to get a guy that's a special teams guy. Now, he might be a lot of that this first year, but he's more athletic than I thought in person. I mean, he runs well. I can see him playing like a dime or getting involved. I just don't know that he can beat out Damari Mathis right away. I thought Mathis played well last year after his first game. But in terms of the rookies who stuck out, Sanders was by far the best. Like, it was him and everyone else in terms of the one practice we had media viewing. I'm intrigued by where he impacts, because he's going to impact this team this season.
Outstanding. Yeah, I love it. And we actually we had the privilege of interviewing Riley Moss at the Senior Bowl. So on top of what you see on the field, he's actually a very genuinely good dude too. Like, he's just a super great guy. I think he's going to be great in the locker room for that team as well. Speaking of the locker room, we've kind of touched on it a little bit. Patrick, I want your thoughts on Sean Payton and what you feel Sean can do to help bring the Broncos back where they need to be.
Well, the biggest thing is Sean Payton is not a rookie head coach. You know, that is the biggest thing. Is we've seen over the last 6-7 years, we've seen them bring in these guys that, you know, they're bringing in new head coaches and trying to get that new wave of that NFL success that some of these other teams are having. And when all else fails, you go back to a veteran head coach who has had proven success in this league. The biggest thing that I've already noticed from the Broncos team this offseason from Sean Payton is just a completely different attitude. Everything that I've been hearing from people that have connections is that the players are excited. They're ready to get to work. It's just that grind mentality. And Sean Payton's just coming in with like, no BS. We're not going to do the things that we did last year. We're not going to do the things that we did the last 6-7 years. We are going to get back to Broncos being successful. And Troy, you said it perfectly, that Mike Shanahan attitude. That's where that success comes from. That's what they had with Gary Kubiak as a head coach. That's what they've been missing these last few years. Sean Payton is going to bring that whole new attitude into the locker room. And hopefully we see that result on the field, because these fans, they've been waiting, and we can't have these same mistakes that they've been having these last couple of years. Last year was abysmal. Everybody was so excited for the season, and really it was just such a big letdown that it's like something drastic had to happen. And I feel like Sean Payton has come in and just completely changed the culture from day one. Everything with Russell Wilson and all that stuff, we can just leave that in 2022. Sean Payton is just going to come in and completely change that. The feeling that I've been getting, after looking back at what Sean Payton did in New Orleans with the Saints, when he came in, they were an abysmal team. They were 31st in scoring. He turned them into a top 5 scoring team, and they really stayed in that kind of realm. They were a top 10 team. I think only like 3 other years in his tenure in New Orleans, they were outside of the top 10. So I'm just really looking forward to him changing the culture, shifting that offense, and hopefully we can get back to playing good Broncos football.
So another thing that Sean Payton is really good about is his offensive line. He's always adamant about having a good, strong, solid offensive line. And as bad as Russell Wilson was at times last season, it never really seemed to me as an outsider, not a traditional Broncos fan, but as an outsider looking in, it never really typically seemed to me like it was necessarily the offensive line's fault. I felt like for the most part, they had a solid season. PFN has them ranked as the 11th ranked offensive line headed into the 2023 season as of right now. So, Troy, have they done anything to help out with that offensive line in the offseason, or do they feel like they're good enough right now and they're just going to work with what they have?
Yeah, I would disagree with you. They were bad on the offensive line, and mainly because they couldn't prevent pressure up the middle. And Russell Wilson trying to reinvent himself as a pocket passer, which was a complete abject failure. He couldn't see with the pressure coming up the middle, and that was a problem all year. And Sean Payton, as you mentioned, he saw with Drew Brees, if you're going to, especially as Drew Brees got older, you got to have a great line. I mean, you can't ask him to do things he's not capable of physically and not have time. And they went out and got Mike McGlinchey. I've said this a million times. I mean, the Broncos have had more right tackles than Spinal Tap's had drummers. It's a joke. At some point, you got to have stability at that position.
Yeah.
And they're going to have their, if my math is right, I think it's their seventh different starting right tackle on opening day in 7 straight years. It's been awful. And so McGlinchey, even I think they overpaid for McGlinchey personally, but if he just stabilizes that position, the money isn't my problem. I'm not paying it. And the cap money is so much monopoly that if he stabilizes the position, that's a huge upgrade there. You bring in Ben Powers. Listen, I love Dalton Reisner, everything about the person, but it was time for him to move on. I think he will do better when he signs elsewhere, not having the glow of being the Colorado kid and being under that kind of scrutiny as a left guard. But Ben Powers didn't allow a sack last year. He didn't allow a single sack, according to Pro Football Focus. So that should help. And he's a brute. He's physical, just like McGlinchey. I mean, McGlinchey, it comes from the Niners, where a run first attack. The questions then become, because I think Quinn Miners is going to be fine. He fits this physical mentality. Is Garrett Bowles going to be healthy? He had a brutal broken leg / ankle that ended his season. I don't know what he's going to look like returning from that. It wasn't just a simple broken leg. So we got to see him. And I have not seen him physically since the end of last season. And what are you going to do when you look at center with Lloyd Cushenberry? We all love Lloyd. Great guy. I mean, the Broncos, for the most part, have a great locker room. So it's not anything. It's never personal with these guys. It's just business. Lloyd's got to be better. He's got to be better. He's got to be more physical. And they drafted Alex Forsythe for a reason. I think he'll challenge him. He and Kyle Fuller are going to push Lloyd. Lloyd's the starter for now. But the difference I think you're going to see with Sean Payton is accountability and consequences. Like Nate Hackett, if you're around him, he's an easy guy to like. He's caffeinated. He's fun. Players loved him. He's hugged. But he couldn't hold people accountable, whether it was his coaches or his players. He was so miscast in that way. And Sean Payton has no problem with that. He has no problem being an a-hole to anyone. And I've heard on game day, it's amped up by 1 million. Like, that's what I'm saying, like the Mike Shanahan vibe. When you walk in the room, you know who's in charge. And Kubiak did it more as a fatherly figure, a stern father. Shanahan operated out of fear at times. And Payton 100% does. So I'm curious to see what that looks like, because they've weeded out. I think there's 23 guys gone that were with them at the end of last year. I mean, they're going to end up turning over probably almost not half the roster, but probably 40% of the roster is going to turn over. And that's a direct reflection of Sean Payton wanting his type of player, his type of buy-in, and he's not going to put up with any BS. And it's reflected in their new media policies. It's reflected in our access to the players. It's reflected on how the players talk when we do interview them. So there's a system. And the players, as Patrick mentioned, they're buying in because Sean Payton did it for 16 years. We're not asking stupid questions of, where are you going to stand on the field? And how are you going to call plays? And none of that, training wheels bullshit. We have a real coach and adult in the room. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But they bought a guy who's I keep telling people this. He didn't leave New Orleans. He brought New Orleans with him. It's the same program.
Yeah. Well
said.
A little bit of bringing New Orleans with him is kind of on to my next point, which is the tight end position. So a lot of teams at the tight end position are stacked top heavy. They've got they've got their top guy. They've got one of the best in the league. You got Travis Kelce, you got Mark Andrews. But after those top guys on their roster, they don't have the depth that the Broncos have now at the tight end position. And Sean Payton did bring along Adam Troutman to go along with the other 2 young tight ends. There's real potential here that one of them could have a breakout season. So, Patrick, do you have any kind of a feeling for any of these tight ends to have any kind of maybe run support, maybe blocking, or even in the passing game?
Well, the other person that he brought with him was Chris Manhertz. Troutman was the draft trade, but Manhertz was the guy that they brought along to be that run blocking tight end. I feel like with this group, the guy that has the most to gain from Sean Payton is Greg Dulcich. Athletic tight end. You know, he showed flashes last year, especially late down the season. I think he was like top 5 in yards per reception among tight ends. But this is the Sean Payton offense is so friendly to tight ends that can push the field vertically. We remember Jimmy Graham. We remember Jeremy Shockey. These guys were big tight ends, not the best run blockers, but he could still utilize them in ways to get them the ball and utilize their athleticism. I think that we're going to see both Dulcich and a guy who last year was really kind of shut out, who a lot of people thought was going to be successful, Albert Okwuegbunam. I think that Albert, if he's in camp and he's healthy and he is getting the offense down, this guy has a chance to be that vertical threat that we all really thought that he was going to be. Historically, looking at Sean Payton's teams, he's kept about 4 or 5 tight ends on the roster, depending on how many wide receivers he keeps. And this is a very big correlation. If he keeps 6 or 7 wide receivers, he's going to keep 4 tight ends on that roster. Manhurts and Troutman, I think those are going to be the 2 guys that you really see as their typical Y tight ends. They're blocking, red zone threats. Dulcich and Albert, they have the opportunity to be in that 22 personnel as the move tight end, move them around, put them in the slot, put them outside, get those mismatches, use their vertical speed and their size to create big offensive mismatches. And we see this with Kansas City. They've been doing this for years. They move Kelsey outside, they move him into the slot, they still keep him in line. Sean Payton is going to figure out the best way to use not just one, not just 2, but all 4 of these guys in this room in very specific ways. I would love to see Dulcich and Alberto in those red zone situations, because Albert was fantastic in those situations a couple of years ago, and then last year just dropped off the face of the earth. So if there's anybody that I see having that breakout year under Sean Payton, it's definitely Dulcich. I think that he has the most to gain. He's a great route runner, former wide receiver, good blocker in space, and he's a willing blocker. I feel like he's more of a willing blocker than Albert at times, but you see it there. So with the new coaching staff that's being brought in, the new offensive line coach that's being brought in, these are all great things for both Greg and Al. But I think Greg is probably the one that we're going to see have the most impact in that offense on day one.
I think one thing, Patrick, people got, I think, misled when Sean Payton at the NFL owners meetings, I was there, he was asked about Dulcich. Yeah. He said, I can't even evaluate him. It was a criticism of the offense. It wasn't Dulcich.
Not on Dulcich.
This offense was such a cluster F that I couldn't even evaluate him. And I think some people got thrown off the scent, like, oh, Dulcich, he's on the rope. He's not. Now, I do think one place I would say, I don't really disagree. It feels like a one of the Dulcich and Alberto. Alberto's got to grow up. Part of the issue with him is behind the scenes. He's got to practice better. The effort and attitude have to be consistent. The talent is off the charts. That's not an issue. But with Sean Payton, he's not going to deal with, oh, you had 2 bad practices, 1 good one. Okay, you're going to play on Sunday. It's not going to work that way. And some of these guys are in for absolute rude awakening in training camp. I mean, rude. They're going to be in pads more. It's going to be physical. So, Alberto, you saw with that Kansas City game, you could see what he could do. Like Rosberg, just like revelation. Oh, my God, I saw this guy practice. Why aren't we using him? Well, again, the Broncos, Butchberry was terrible, the line coach.
Yeah,
awful. And Alberto got sideways with him. By the time we were in London watching him practice, it was bad. I'll just put it that way with Alberto. And you could tell it was over for him probably to play, but he's got to do his part. You can't just show up and look 100%. Like, oh, I'm 6'5", 250, and I'm faster than everyone. Sean Payton doesn't care. Like, you've got to know the playbook. He said that last week with the rookies. If you don't know the playbook, you're not playing. It's not, I'm going to baby you. I'm going to coddle you. And so I hope that is the wake-up call for Alberto, because the talent is real. He's a walking mismatch, but they're not going to wait for him. They're not going to wait for him. Again, they told you that by getting Troutman.
Yep, exactly. And I think that if he can put it together, it'd be fantastic. Like it's what we all want to see, from a fandom standpoint. It's like, why wasn't this guy on the field last year? And everybody was asking that question. And, I thank you for bringing that information to light, because that is something as a coach myself, I could have a kid who has all the talent in the world, but if you have a bad attitude and you're not willing to put the work in off the field and in the film room and in the weight room and then into practice, I can't put you out there. You're gonna cost me. If football is a game with 11 guys on the field,
undermine your credibility in the locker room is the problem.
Yes,
people don't understand. Like you can see certain guys in a vacuum if they're superstars. Absolutely, guys get treated differently. But if you're just a guy, I can't let you show up late. I can't let you give 5 reps when I ask for 8. Like I can't do that, because once I do it with you, there's 40 other guys on the roster. Like, what the heck? And that's the problem when you coach. Is Albert O was probably always that guy at every level. He's such a physical marvel, but it's not a bad attitude as much as he's just it's got to be as his life. You got to eat it, sleep it, breathe it now. And if he does that, he's going to be a big part of it. He doesn't. Greg Dulcich is going to move past him, and Albert O's not, it's just going to, just like last year, he's just going to get passed by.
Now with Albert, and I know last year there were a lot of talks and we would see, these like mock trades, right? With Albert, them sending Albert to Green Bay or sending Albert to Pittsburgh, or is there if it comes down to it at the end of training camp and we're going into the season, do you think that there's still going to be that trade value for Albert, or do you think that's kind of like it's going to be release or cut?
Yeah, there's just not a lot of trade value for him unless, he'd have to go off in training camp in a way that in a preseason game, frankly, in front of scouts where they feel, because it's just, you look at what trades are for guys. You're looking at what, a 6th, 7th rounder, a conditional 7th. There's just not a lot of value there because there's no stats there. And you would have to find a team, in my experience of covering the NFL, that loved him coming out of the draft. And I don't know who else did. I would have to look it up in my notes. But find a team that loved him coming out of the draft. I think they want him to make it, like you said. And Sean Payton uses the tight ends in space as good as anyone. And so they want him to be there. But it could come down to, is like Handler going to make it? Or is it if Handler's on the outs because of Mims?
Right.
How does it? Montreal Washington, I don't see a scenario where he makes it with Mims on the team. But like you mentioned, how do they do that special teams thing? Is that a receiver special teams guy? Is that little Jordan Humphrey? Is he on the team in some weird special teams role? That's where it starts to affect a guy like Albert, because he's not known as showing up as a special teams guy. And when you're on that 47 to 53 or 46 to 53 on the roster and you don't play special teams, it gets really difficult to stick. Yeah.
And you bring it up, Lil Jordan as well. Like Sean Payton in New Orleans used him as kind of like a big receiver, hybrid tight end type of guy. And he was a very big part of their blocking scheme. And that's somewhere where if he's going to keep LJ as a wide receiver / tight end, he's going to be using that role. So I feel like Albert would have to come out and like show he's gotten better in the blocking game. He understands the run concepts. He understands his footwork and mechanics as far as blocking go, but he also does have to have that special teams presence. If you don't play special teams as a 3rd, 4th guy on the depth chart, you're just not going to see the field, and you're not going to be on the roster.
That was absolutely outstanding. It's pretty rare that I get that much feedback from my tight end question. So
I'm a tight end coach, man. I'm a tight end coach.
Well, I saw you were a coach. I didn't know. That's awesome. That's awesome. I want to give you guys each, before I ask my final question, I always want to give you guys a chance each to talk about the defense. So Troy, we'll start with you because you're the boots on the ground. What kind of differences is Sean Payton and that coaching staff going to make? What are they going to implement to change up this defense a little bit? Because there's going to be changes just naturally.
Yeah, likely with Vance Joseph, it's going to look similar to it has the last couple of years. I do think he will be a little more creative in how he uses Drew Sanders, as we talked about earlier. And Zach Allen knows Vance Joseph well. Zach Allen's here in large part because of Vance Joseph. And I love Draymond Jones. If there was a criticism of Draymond Jones, he wasn't consistent in the run game. Zach Allen is more consistent in the run game. Draymond Jones is going to give you more wow plays as a rusher, but Zach Allen's productivity as a pass rusher is not that dissimilar, frankly, to Draymond Jones. So can Zach Allen give you a little more in stopping the run? That was a little bit of a weak spot at times last year. And let's be honest, the one criticism that's fair of the defense, because I thought Coach Ejiro did a great job, a fantastic job. They didn't finish games. And part of it was because they were on the field forever because the offense sucked. We know that. But they didn't finish games. And so under Sean Payton, will that discipline? Because last year they were the most penalized team until the last week of the season. They were entirely disorganized in so many ways. And there's this one unit that actually held its ground all year was the defense. But even the elasticity in the rubber band, it finally breaks. But can this year, with a balanced offense, with consistent time of possession, running the football more than they did last year, at least running it more successfully, can that allow the defense to finish when you're up by 3 or up by 6 with 4 minutes to go? And so that's what I'm looking for from this defense. If they step back, as much as I like Vance Joseph, I've known him. I was in college with him, had class with him in college at CU. I love Vance Joseph, the person. If they step back, the fans are going to devour him because they're still mad about him as the head coach. He comes in with no honeymoon period. But as a defensive coordinator, he's creative. And I know last year the Cardinals, they were terrible, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because it was a tire fire there. But they need to be a little more creative, and they need to finish games. Can they finish? And can that be the difference between the 8 wins or 10 wins?
Yep. Completely agree. And you said it perfectly. Vance he had a rough go of it in Arizona. They had some pieces, but he didn't have nearly the personnel that he has in Denver this year. I mean, he's got a way better secondary. The front seven, I feel like the front seven is an upgrade as well. And the thing that I'm most excited to see is how they use Drew Sanders. Like, this edge depth is really concerning. Baron Browning, we've seen flashes. Like, he's a crazy athlete, right? Crazy athlete, but has to stay healthy as well. And he's still kind of learning how to be a pass rusher in the NFL. Can they make Drew Sanders into like a Micah Parsons type guy where they kind of use him all over the field? I feel like Vance Joseph has that creativity. I would love to see how they utilize Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton coming back again. And then this safety room is deep. It's really deep. I was surprised even after drafting JL Skinner, who I loved him in the draft process. I was still like, wow, they're bringing back Kareem Jackson. So now we've got veteran leadership. We've got a young rookie who's a big dude, can help on special teams. You still have Caden Stearns there. Justin Simmons is still one of the best safeties in the league. This is a insanely deep safety room. The cornerback room is also very talented. So I would love to see them be able to finish games. Troy, I was there in Seattle for game 1. I was there in Seattle. I saw the mistakes. I saw all of that, and I saw how hard the defense was playing. The defense did not lose them that game at all. That was a coaching, that was offense, that was execution. All those phases of the game, it led to that big mistake. I will never forget the fourth quarter, standing there, Seahawks fans screaming around me, and I'm just watching the clock tick, 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 tick. And I'm just like, what are we doing? What are we doing as a team?
I was standing in the end zone when they got to 46. They got to the 46-yard line. They called timeout, and I'm like, why? And then to listen to the explanation afterward, it was like a youth coach. He's like, well, I went up to Brandon, and he said once we got to 46, he could make it. Okay, that's good. A, you don't have to believe it. And B, he's talking about that's with 2 seconds left. That's not in. And if you had gone for it on 4th and 5 with the quarterback you just paid $250 million, nobody cares. That's why you paid him.
Exactly.
And if it's incomplete, who cares? Hey, we went with Russell. He didn't have it. I mean, between that loss and the one against the Colts, the Colts loss when Russell threw the pick that led to that loss, that was the worst loss of the last 7 years. Given the expectations, given the player involved, that was the worst clock management. That's when I was yelling after the game in my post game on Denver 7, like, put Will Hunting in the booth, for Jesus Christ. How dumb are you to not understand the math that if you kick a field goal there with 147, you win the game because they have no timeouts, and Matt Ryan retired. He just didn't tell anyone. My God, it was just so stupid. Even now I get hot about it because it was just so mismanaged. It was just malpractice. Even allow that throw to happen to Tyree Cleveland against Stephon Gilmore. In what world does that make sense?
Never.
Everything about it was stupid. But the one thing, the thing about their defense that concerns me, they lack depth on the defensive line. they're not done for me adding. I think you're going to see 2 or 3 additions there, either in training camp or after June 1st. They've got to get depth there. And if their outside linebacker room is going to be right, they need Randy Gregory to play around 12 games. He's got to play 12
absolutely.
games. I hope he can. And Nick Bonito, I've seen him this offseason. He looks good. He's got to be a factor in some way. You can't keep missing on picks. The reason they had to get Moss is because they've whiffed on Ojemudia. The reason they're getting Mims is because Hamler can't be healthy. You can't keep drafting the same positions over again. Like, you've got to be able to move on. They need Bonito to be a contributor. He doesn't have to be a starter, but he's got to be good this year, not be a one-move guy. And I know he's focused on it, so we'll see. But Gregory's the X factor. If he plays 10, 12 games, that room will be fine. If he plays 4, we're going to be looking up going, man, they're ranked near the bottom in sacks.
Yeah. I want to see what Chris Allen does too. He was a guy that wasn't undrafted free agent, but man, when I was at camp last year and I got that close look at him, that guy's a monster. He is very big, but he was really raw, still has some work to do in pass rush. But if they can get him going and he's back healthy, that's a good depth add. But I feel you, man. They need Gregory to be healthy. They need Bonito to start producing a little bit more than just on, obvious passing downs. Like, you got to be able to set the edge in this league. And if you can't, you're going to be gone. And Sean Payton's not going to deal with it this year.
Well, you killed them when Chubb left. And I know people were down on Chubb, but look at their sack numbers and their rush defense when Chubb left. I mean, the guy's 270. No one else set the edge. As soon as he left, they were vulnerable. And you can compensate for that if Gregory plays at a high level and you get, like you said, Christian, he plays well, or Bonito. But that position concerns me because you've got to affect the quarterback. You cannot win consistently in this league if you can't affect the quarterback. But, again, I think with Sanders, I think with blitzes, they're going to be a little more creative. There's ways around it. But to do that, you got to lead in games. To be creative defensively, you have to lead in games. That's where the Sean Payton effect for me is going to be huge. As you play in front, you're the pace car, and it changes everything on how you play defensively and how you get turnovers. So that would be exciting because what we've watched the last 6 years offensively, it just burns my retinas. It's embarrassing.
Same.
And I wasn't going to mention it until you just talked about playing with the lead. Is Javonte Williams going to be ready?
Their optimism around him has changed so much. When we talked with George Payton at the Combine, he talked in terms of him being ready for the season opener. Then before the draft, he's like, we've got to be patient with him. We don't know. And then Sean Payton drops the nugget last week that I think he's going to be cleared for training camp and off the PUP list. That would be 9.5 months removed from not just ACL surgery, but it's my understanding there was other damage to the knee, the right knee.
LCL.
I don't think that's fair to him, frankly, to think he's going to be right away. No. If you look at the last 22 running backs who had ACL surgery, their first year back was very, very pedestrian, to put it mildly. So I think for me, the best Javonte Williams we're going to see is starting in like October. And P. Ryan's going to start in September. You're easing Javonte back, and then he gets going. I hope I'm wrong. I'm just saying, if you're talking about 9.5 months being ready to go, that's just ambitious. What it does tell me, though, is he should be ready for the regular season. If you're already saying he's probably not going to be on the PUP list, well, I don't know why he wouldn't be ready for the regular season. I've talked to Javonte this offseason. He's cleared every hurdle. He's in a good space mentally. He's just never had a major injury he's ever come back from in his life. So I just don't want to put it on the kid that, oh, he's fine. Is he? I mean, give the guy a little chance here. Give him a little cushion. He's not coming back from just a traditional ACL surgery. Not everyone's Adrian Peterson. Give the guy a little cushion to get back. That's why I say look for October for him to get his legs underneath him.
Yeah. And even
P. Ryan is no slouch.
No, he's good. Yeah, I don't think over the course of 17 games he would be the answer, but he's great on third down. He's great on blitz pickup. And a combination of he with Javonte, that could be really good. We just saw it with Mixon and P. Ryan. It'd be very similar. But P. Ryan could carry the load for sure early. I just don't know that 17 weeks would be the best way to use him. That's why at some point you need Javonte healthy and productive. And whether that's middle of October, whenever, it's fine. If you're staying in it, you're 3-3, whatever, and here comes Javonte playing great football. Now you got P. Ryan. P. Ryan will be your third down back. So it's an obvious use for him.
Yeah.
Yep. Right on. I do want to get to the final question real quick. The final question is always a prediction of what you feel is you're about to see this up and coming season. But I want you to take your fandom hats off and try to make this as realistic as possible in your own mind. Keeping in mind, if you look at their schedule, they have some very winnable games early in the schedule and late in the schedule, and it looks like the meat of their schedule is kind of like right in the middle there. So, realistically speaking, and then I'll let you guys off the hook. What are your predictions for this coming season? And it doesn't have to be win-loss; it could also be performance. It could be whatever you want to talk about on a big prediction.
Well, I'm fine going prediction. I have them 9-8. Again, I didn't grow up like a Broncos fan. I grew up a fan of John Elway. So it's not like, I cover the team. I love covering the players, telling their stories. So I see it probably a little more objectively than some that are, openly rooting for the team. I mean, them doing well, I root for the story, and I want them to do well because them stinking has been that narrative's, there's no tread left on that tire. We've told that story for 7 years. And it's just not a great story. So I see them 9-8 with a very good chance of winning 10 games if Sean Payton is the coach I think he is, but I have him going 9-8. Two things have to happen. One, you got to reestablish home dominance. They've been terrible at home. And secondly, you have to be better in their division. You realize they're 6-18 in the AFC West, their last 24 AFC West games. 6-18. They're a joke.
Not great.
And they've lost 15 straight to the Chiefs and 8 of 9 to the Raiders. Not a great Raiders team, not John Madden Raiders,
right.
The last brass of Raiders. They got swept by Josh McDaniels last year. So number one is go 3-3 in the division and then win 6 games at home. You have 9 games. Win 6 at home. Now you're looking at between 9 and 10 wins because don't start saying we're going to win at Buffalo and we're going to win at Kansas City this year. And we're going to stop.
No.
Be realistic. No. Be realistic. No. And so for me, 9 wins with a very good chance to get to 10 and go into the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Troy. I think 9-10 wins is more than reasonable. We've seen Sean Payton turn teams around before. Like I said, with the Saints, when he took over, they went from 31st to 5th in scoring. Do I expect that same kind of jump in Denver? Probably not. But I do think that the offense will be significantly better. And if they can, the defensive product, like you said, Troy, they will be off the field more. And that's what we need. They can play at a really high level when they stay off the field. But that's the key. Offense has to be able to sustain drives and put points on the board. I think 9-10 games is more than realistic. But yeah, at Kansas City on a short week, absolutely not. At Buffalo after a bye week, there's potential, but like let's not say that's a easy or winnable game. Like there's going to be a lot of
that's
tough
on
games.
Monday night too. That's on Monday night.
Yeah, in Buffalo. Are you kidding me? Bills Mafia is going to be absolutely insane.
But you can win. You can beat Chicago at Chicago.
Yeah, you can beat Chicago.
You got to sweep the Raiders this year. Sweep the Raiders. Even if you lose 2 to the Chiefs, you sweep the Raiders and split with the Chargers. Now you got something.
Yeah,
you can't keep getting swept by 2 teams in your own division. Now you're already chasing uphill. Like it's just, again, it's one thing when it's the Chiefs. They're winning championships. You can't get swept by the Raiders. Like you can't. That's just 2 wins that you can't. When you look at their schedule, that's why the opening game is a big game for them. You open with the Raiders at home. That's a game you need to win because as soon as you lose that game, just like they lost to Seattle, I told people now you got to win somewhere else that you weren't supposed to win because that should have been a win. And now you start chasing. And when you start chasing, it's tough unless you're competent offensively. And maybe they will be. I hope they are. But when you stink offensively, you start looking at wins. Where are they? There are not a lot of wins out there when you stink offensively.
Yeah. And there's going to be a lot of tough games. I feel like there's going to be more of those the trap games, we call them. There's going to be more of those trap games than we would ever think. I mean, looking late in the schedule too, there's a good chance Houston's one of those teams that I'm like late. We have to play them late in the season and on the road. And that's going to be a tough game. A lot of people are going to count them out, but they're going to have the time to get stuff together. And I think that D'Amico Ryans is in a good spot. We got to play Miami early in Miami in September.
That's not good.
It's humid. It's a Vic Fangio revenge game. Like that's not going to be an easy win for them. It doesn't matter who's at quarterback for them. If they lose to a Tua or a Mike White led Dolphins team, I mean, people are going to be upset, but like the focus has to be, like you said, on those division games. You have to beat the Raiders. You have to sweep the Raiders this year. There's no excuse. Waller's not there anymore. Yeah, they got Devontae Adams, but Garoppolo's there. You have to win that game. You have to at least split with the Chargers, and those 2 games are late in the season too. Yeah. Those are not going to be easy games. So, and honestly, if they lose both games to Kansas City, I'm not going to be shocked.
That wouldn't prevent them from getting where they want to go. No, the swing games for me are the Jets in Denver, the Browns, and then the Patriots, because those are teams you're going to be dealing with tiebreakers with. Mm-hmm. And the Jets, I normally, if in a vacuum, I would pick them to beat the Jets. But if you look at the Jets' schedule prior to that, that's going to be a must-win game for the Jets. The Jets' schedule is terrible early in the season, and the pressure is going to be ratcheted up. So I picked, because there's always a game you think they're going to win, they're going to lose. I picked them to lose to the Jets. If they win that game, all of a sudden I have them at 10 wins. But you got to beat the Browns at home, the Jets at home, and the Patriots at home, because those are the teams you're going to be in that final spot for in a tiebreaker.
Yep, exactly. Well said, Troy.
Outstanding. This was great stuff, guys. This is why we had the experts come on. We really appreciate your time here. Yeah. The viewers still watching down there in the bottom corner, you see the water marker. Please hit us with that subscribe button. I'm going to flash down here at the bottom where you can find these 2 amazing guests real quick. Patrick Chiotti, this is your second time on. We really appreciate your time,
buddy. Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You guys do a great job. And Troy, nothing but love for you, man. You do an awesome job. It's always a pleasure seeing your tweets coming across my timeline, and you're one of the best in the biz, man.
Appreciate it, Patrick. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for reaching out, guys, to have me on this pod. It's been a joy.
Yeah, and Troy, for me personally, I'll be honest with you, since I'm not from the Denver area, I didn't know a heck of a lot about you. I did some research. I started watching some of your interviews. I don't know if your charisma was something that was taught to you, but you excel in it, man. I can tell why you're so good at your job. So we really appreciate your time as well.
Appreciate you guys. Let me know when you get me on again when they're winning.
Absolutely.
If we have some crazy news drop during the season, I'll be reaching out to you for sure. But for now, that's a wrap, guys.
Thank you so much.